years later, recollections of the 72 flood of Sturgis, South Dakota. First of all, every one of us have different experiences about this event. So there might be differing opinions, and that's okay, because each one of us had a different perspective on it. I learned this from our presenter last month. You know, we talked about that there's even sometimes dates will be different. Now we obviously know the dates for this are very locked in. There's no getting around June 9th, 1972 and what happened that day. So let's just be respectful if there's, you know, just remember that. So, you know, most people are pretty good in here, so. But I just wanted to start with that. So, where did it all start? Actually, this is where it started. This was the first flash flood warning for the Black Hills area, and it was for the Northern Hills. Can everybody see that fine? I'm not going to take the time to read it, but and Jim actually pointed out to me it was interesting that something about campers in there somewhere, isn't there? All campers should be on the alert and move to higher ground. The next we have, headlines. Okay, we're going to go through some headlines, and I wanted to, David Super was not able to be here today, but he did relay this story to me, and I really kind of want to read it because it kind of sets the stage for that night and the next day. Okay. Somebody had a conversation with Sturgis Tribune, Black Hills Press reporter, photographer Earl Sampson. Earl and his wife, June, were dinner guests at the home of Dale and Jan Lamphere, evening of the flood. At the time, Dale and Jan lived in a mobile home that was parked adjacent to his parents' home out along Beardy Creek. When it became evident that it was no longer safe to travel back to Sturgis via Highway 3479, arrangements were made for Earl's wife June and 3 children to stay at Oakley and Laura Lamphere Big Ranch home. Earl, on the other hand, knew that the Tribune Press editor, Bob Lee, would have difficulty getting to work on Saturday morning, as the Lees lived in Boulder Canyon. Even the intrepid reporter, photographer, and not about to miss out on a big story, Earl convinced Dale to drive him to the west entrance of Fort Meade. From there, Earl hiked up over the hill, out on the eastern edge of the Bear Butte Cemetery. From there, he walked to his apartment on East Main Street, got his car, and headed off to work at the paper. He recalls spending most of the night riding around in the back of a National Guard truck, doing what he could to take photos. And like me, his flash gear got wet and quit working. I'm sure, I mean, it had to have been. He rested a few hours in his apartment in the wee hours and was on duty at the Tribune Press office. By then, Morris Halleck made arrangements for Earl to fly in the back seat of a crop sprayer airplane, piloted either by Coach Chapman or Roger Halafka. Earl can't remember who it was at the controls of the plane, but they first headed out to Rapid City, photographed there. From that point, Earl remembered photographing scenes of damage in and around Sturgis at ground level. So pictures you have from editions of the local paper following the flood are likely Earl's. So most of these will be Earl's, and we'll transition to others early. So anyway, that sets the story. Let's see. Okay, I am not going to, there are lots of captions here. I'm not going to read all of them. or maybe even very many of them at all. We're just going to go through just some quick headlines here. So there's, and this was from a special edition. There was in the Sturgis Tribune, Black Hills Press, and the Rapid City Guide. There's, I'm sure recognize that building there on the right. Okay. And then this actually confirms in the bottom corner, it says flood photos by Earl Swanson. So that kind of, Earl Sampson, sorry I said that wrong. So this does confirm that these pictures are probably from Earl. These early pictures, there's the creek on the top. Unfortunately, wonderful headline, but we don't have a caption for it, so we don't really know what it is. I mean, we know where it is, but we don't, it doesn't give any details. And Jim and I found that quite often in our research. It was tough to, they didn't have captions. This is a fascinating read. I have it over there on the table. This gal does a wonderful job of really giving a synopsis of what was happening in the Sturgis. And the interesting thing in this article that Jim had pointed out to me.
Richard, that is a man. Lynn Gladstone was a man.
Okay, sorry. Okay, see, I knew somebody was going to correct me somewhere. Thank you, Bonnie.
Right, yes.
Yeah, all right, it had to be you. All right. But the interesting thing in this that I wasn't aware of is the conversation about possibly closing permanently 14A. That was evidently a conversation at the time. So that was some interesting point I wanted to dig out on that. So that's other headlines. Now we're up to the people. I found an article that Deb did on the 40th, and I just wanted to sweep through a few people that are no longer with us. One of them we actually, Bonnie and I, talked about getting here, and unfortunately, well, her funeral was tomorrow. So I wanted to relay this. I can do without crying. I'm just that kind of person. So you all know we're talking about Margaret Cleveland. Remembered the mud. Clement said the mud brought in by her husband and guests, because their house was a haven, is still vivid from the event. Les, who kept the community of Sturgis and the surrounding area informed of goings on during the tragic event, not only was he out driving around getting first-hand accounts of the storm, he also was providing a safe haven for some. Margaret Cleveland said Les got a call from some friends whose house was in danger of being flooded. So picked them up and drove them to the Cleveland home on Nellie Street. Dorothy and Leo Getsko, their article was over there on the counter. If you want to read it, their harrowing story of trying to get from Lee to their home on David Drive is fascinating. I mean, it's a good read. I emailed David Super when he sent me that story from Earl. I said, this would make a good movie. So maybe a little embellishing. And then Joe DeCharles remembers going out in the storm to help find people and get them to safety. Rescuing a young couple with a newborn baby on Junction Avenue. This one's kind of a funny one. Bob Meckling recalls when someone told his wife Ruth that he had been killed in the flood while working with the National Guard, and how surprised his family was when they saw him get home from fighting the flood in Rapid City. That's, like I said, the article's over there on the counter if you want to read. And that was Deb Holland actually. That was from the 40th, right? Yeah. So. Yeah. Now we're going to do some pictures of the people here. So there's Jack Dempsey on the right there, and Paul. I don't have any idea what that last name is. Or other things. Yep. There. And somebody told, you know, I didn't go back and look this up. Because David Super on Facebook had made some more comment on that. They did not grab it, unfortunately. She was gonna do that. Okay. Because he's giving me more information on that. And here's just some other people helping out. One on the left there is Fire Chief Lloyd Erickson. Marty Jolly there too? Yeah. Sure enough. Okay. Here's National Guard. That one on the right is, they were giving out tetanus and typhoid shots, which I'm sure was of great concern. I'm sure everybody will recognize these people as being some of the leadership in our community at the time. Dan Mayor and Mayor Francis Lange, they're on the left, and then the mayor with Governor Knipe on the right. Okay, and then this is, kind of wanted to touch on what it was like for families and children at the time. On the left there, Mrs. Charles Winchester. I saw that name, and who did I think of? Yeah. Yes, exactly. It's like, oh, Charles. Made things comfy for the kids who spent the night at the fire hall. And then this is I'm going to make a personal note here. That picture on the right, I was not yet 4 years old, and we had spent the day. Mom was good friends with Dorothy Kaiser, and we had spent the day in Rapid. I don't remember coming home in the deluge of water, but I remember Mom telling about coming home in the rain and how hard it was. It was raining sheets, and I do remember there was a screen door there, and as a 3, almost 4-year-old, I remember looking out to the street, and this is one of my earliest recollections, and it's the only time, and I lived in Sturgis most of my life. It's the only time I ever remember flooding coming up into a front yard. You know, in the summertime we can expect to have street curb to curb, but it was the only time I ever remember it coming up in the front yard. So that's my story, and then we will read your story at this moment.
I want you to use the microphone, please stand so that everybody tell people who you are in this situation.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I'm not
That's
going
right,
to
you can't
stand.
stand.
Yeah, I had hip surgery, which I'm still recovering from, but I'm tall enough, hopefully you can see me. My name is Carla Alexander. I was 11 years old, had just finished 6th grade in the summer of 1972. So some of what I'm going to talk about today is from a child's perspective. And so take that into account, as Richard said when we're talking about what time things happened or the events, is how I remember them. But also the flood had, even though no lives thankfully were lost in Sturgis, the flood had a pretty significant impact on my family. My father and mother, Buzz and Evelyn Alexander, and I'll tell you where we lived at the time and where my dad worked. And then my grandparents, Carla and Eula Bartlett, who owned Bartlett Machinery. You saw the picture of the post office? It was right across from there. And so all the water that was in and in front of the post office went through their driveway on the way there, and their home. So I'll talk a little bit about that. That was the weirdest day for rain, and I lived in South Dakota all of my life, in Sturgis most of my life. And I've always called it ploppy rain. The sky was green and pink. I've never ever seen that color again since. And it was ploppy rain because it was big drops. Even though it was raining in sheets, there weren't the little drops that we get in South Dakota. They were big ploppy drops. So it was a weird day all day. My mom was working at Walker's Pharmacy, most recently Town and Country Plumbing. And she had the evening shift that day, so I was home alone with my dad, who worked at what was then Key Chevrolet International Harvester, now Liberty Motors. And he had gotten home about 5, And we were trying to decide what we were going to cook. My father was a horrible cook, so I wasn't looking forward to it. But we were trying to decide what we were going to have for supper. At approximately 5:45 p.m., South Dakota National Guardsman was standing on our doorstep beating on the door, and he said, "We have an evacuation. Bear Butte Creek looks like a fire hose coming out of the canyon. You need to get out of here now." And so my father went to the back. We lived in a mobile home. Sorry, this is a detail I need to talk about. We lived in a mobile home that faced south in that little park next to where McDonald's now is. The best I remember it, where McDonald's running, all that is right now, was an empty lot. Bear Butte Creek turns a corner right there, if you're familiar with that, and it was coming across those lots. So our trailer faced to the south. Bob and Joni Morgan's trailer faced the west. That's going to be important later on. There were far fewer trailers back then. It was a fairly new court at the time. So my dad went to the back of the trailer to get our insurance drawer and told me to get my stuff together. I took my baby doll. I was 11 in that transition period. And so I got my baby doll and he took me out the front door, halfway down the stairs, going into the trailer. The stairs broke away from the step, and so my father had me by the collar, the insurance drawer under his arm, and he carried us out that way. The water in our front yard was approximately 3 feet high because it hit me chest high. We got in the car, and I remember him being extremely worried about what he called the fan going back through the belt. You guys that know cars know what that means. We did have water coming over the hood of the demonstrator, but the car started. We backed out. We got out. There's a rise there, as most of you who've gone to McDonald's know. Dad didn't want to go down the Moselle because it ran parallel to the creek. He didn't think it would be wise. So he went out, up on the interstate, clear across to exit 32, and off on that exit onto Junction, which was only marginally better. When we crossed Dead Man Creek there, it was pushing the car because the water was already coming over the bridge there by the hospital in Wally Greenhouse. So I personally thought my father was insane, but I was just holding on and going with the ride. We get down to Main Street, water running in the gutters up over the curb. Dad drops me off at Walker's. Says, "Your mom's in there, go in there. I'm going back to watch the house go." That's what he said. When you're 11 years old, that's really frightening. Went in, my mom called her boss, Merle Walker, said, "Please come down, close your store, I've got to go." And she and I went to Grandma and Grandpa's house, which again was across from the post office. She pulled in the driveway, their car was not there. She remembered that they were in Rapid City that night for a gun club meeting. And so about that time, Dead Man came through their driveway. I couldn't find a picture of it, and I really wanted to, but at that time, Hooper Motel was located just east of my grandparents' property, and the flood dumped the entire hotel in the basement. So the water diverted around my grandparents' shop, down through their driveway, down through Hooper Motel. I really questioned my parents' parenting ability at that point because now I'm in a second car with water coming over the hood. Mom backed out. If you ever were on that street, there was a heck of a dip coming out of my grandpa's driveway. She hit that pavement about 60, back out. She said, "We're going to go to City Hall." Mom and I both grew up in this town. We were amazed how little we knew about high ground in this town. City Hall wasn't it. We turned the corner by the library. They had been doing water work there. My mom dubbed half of the tires of her 1964 Impala in that ditch. The car sat there till the morning of the 11th. We got out, we went to City Hall. A memory I will never forget, and every time it rains hard I see this memory, is Francis Lange, who we called Lange, coming down the hall in a yellow raincoat, saying, "Evelyn, what the hell are you doing here?" He shuffled us off into things that you wouldn't do today, but in 72 is absolutely safe. Put us in a four-wheel drive with a member of the four-wheeler club we had never met before, who took us to the high point, which was the courthouse on the hill. And we spent the next few hours there listening to KBHB radio broadcast what they knew. There were rumors, and KBHB was very careful to say they were rumors, that Pactola Dam had burst. And the people that were in the room said Pactola went, and the only thing left in Rapid City is Kmart. Remember, my grandparents are in Rapid City. So my mother was very upset. In between the bulletins, they played the song they called the wind Mariah, and over and over. It was evil because there's a line in that song that says, and folks are out there dying. My guess is the disc jockey just grabbed whatever was there and was trying to run the radio. But about 2 or 3 in the morning, we got our angels. Richard talked about Buttons taking in people. Harold and Donnell, I want to make sure I get her name right, Shipley, showed up and they wanted to help. And so they took Mom and I home. We left a message there at the jail where we were headed, and Dad eventually hooked up with us later. So I was very concerned about, did the house go? Is all my stuff gone? What did you mean by that? And this is where Bob and Joni's trailer comes in. The water pushed against Bob and Joni's trailer, again, facing north to the west, running north and south. It pushed their trailer off the blocks and created a diversion dam around that trailer park and saved all of the rest of our trailers. And so we owe, I always tell Joni, we owe her everything that comes from our history. Dad, as I noted, worked at McKee International Chevrolet, and he spent the next few weeks helping them clean out. It ran right through their bays. There's service bays out there right through their showroom. My grandparents showed up about midday on the 10th. They had come the back roads because parts of interstate were closed while they checked the bridges to ensure that they were intact. And they came back the old way, Elk Creek and around. So, and then we spent the afternoon of the 10th calling all the people in Dallas, Texas, Casper, Wyoming, West Coast, and telling them we were alive. Because what was going out on the national news was flooding in the Black Hills, thousands speared dead. And that's all they knew. So we called out the payphone there that used to be behind the knuckle and made sure our families knew we were okay. Everything was, and I inherited some of my grandparents' furniture, and the creek not only ran through their driveway but also through their home. And on their furniture, I have a floor of radios and tables, and all of them have high water marks. My uncle and my grandparents shoveled mud out of that house for weeks. And in fact, when my grandfather died in 1991, he was a bachelor housekeeper. We still found mud in the corners under the road. So that's the story of my family.
Carla, that was wonderful.
I still hate rain in the Black Hills.
We love rain in the Black Hills.
We do. I try to appreciate it, but as long as it's not foggy.
Do you have a few more pictures before you want the gentleman to talk?
Yes.
Okay, he's got a couple more pictures he wants
Yep,
to
and then
bring
we'll-
that is share.
Construction. This is where we're gonna, if you see on that caption, photos by Bob Lee and Earl Sampson. So at this point, it would have been the early, you guys hear me okay? Okay. It would have been that day after that only Earl had pictures, but now we're getting into some pictures that Bob would have been involved with. Okay? So there's some of the destruction. There's McKee International. And actually, Dad started working for them just before the flood. Yeah. Because he talks about cleaning up the mess. Not that I probably get him to talk. There's brick that was washed out. There's the, it must have been called the Hills and Plains Park. I'm assuming that's down what we call the main city park now. Okay. And if anybody ever sees anything in any of this, like for example, that one on the left is Lozelle. The one on the right, Jim Holland, I think that is the confluence of Dead Man Creek and Fairview Creek. But we are not sure. But it looks very, those trees look in the background. I think that's kind of where that park is on the other side of the, on the other side there. The one on the left there There again, we don't know. Jim thinks that may be taken from Sly Hill, down on the Bearview Creek. And there's one here. Okay, that's where now we're heading to some damage up Bearview, or up Boulder Canyon. Okay, and I wanted to point out that that one on the right, the Highway 14A bridge near Emerson Wilson residence in Boulder Canyon, I've got a treat for you at the end, because his daughter sent me some pictures that he actually took. So we'll take a look at them probably later on. So, the dam. I'll go through some of these, and then I'm sure you guys see anything. So the Fort Meade Dam posed a threat. I often wonder why there's a tractor in there. It doesn't look like it, but I'm sure they used anything they possibly could to. This is where they were starting to pump out water, and I'm assuming this is the road to the dam. We'll go a few more here, and then we'll let the guys talk a little bit. Okay, there's, and we can, when you guys, I'm gonna go through these, but we can always go back to these if you want to bring out something more. Dam threat wanes. Just some more headlines. There's more pumping on the side here. There's that. This one on the right is about the only color one I can find of the dam. And that color photo is from the USGS. That's where I found it. There's more pumping. There was somewhere there I saw something like 15,000 of gallons of water per minute. There was somewhere I saw 1,500. We were pumping a lot of water, I'm sure. Okay, now we're getting to the demo. Why don't we let you guys talk? This is a good time to have them talk.
I think it's a great time to have
And
them
then,
talk.
because there's some pictures on the demo here too, that we
Okay.
can go to it. Then I got a little story to go with this as well. But
Okay, just briefly tell your experience and pass it on to the next one. If you'd like to stand or just sit down and introduce yourselves before you start.
I'm Doering. I grew up in Sturgis. I wasn't living here, but here was the flood. But I was in the Guard and I was in Sturgis. Well, part of the Sturgis, there were 2 units in Sturgis at the time. The headquarters of the 109th and detachment of the 842nd, and they were with us in Robe Lake.
Lights way up while those guys are talking.
Annual training period. And there was 237 guardsmen at the Robe Lake. And there was 1,000, a few over 1,000 artillery troops from the eastern part of the state that were at the Badlands. And then there was about 600 people, 600 guardsmen on Camp Rapid. So part of that, 40 of those were from the headquarters of the 109th out of Sturgis. Chris Meckling was probably the paramount, the person that most people would know was in that group. And he had quite a role that night of the night. But anyway, the way that it's listed at the National Guard headquarters is that on June 9th at 6:45 p.m., the Civil Defense Director from Lawrence County called the General Corning. It seems that Clyde McHugh was a highway patrolman from Sturgis, and he was going up Boulder Canyon, and he noticed he detected the water running across the road. And so he called Dick McGrath, who was the Civil Defense Director of Lawrence County. Plus, he was the sheriff. Now, Dick McGrath was not hesitant to call the National Guard on anything. We had been through this before. He had called the general directly, and he wanted 6 trucks to evacuate people. Well, of course, Dick might have been a little bit, fast on the call. As it turned out, he wasn't. He was right on. But anyway, the general called his chief of staff and said, call the commanders together, and it seems like we could have a problem if it keeps raining. And so the National Guard called out and for the staff meeting. Before they could even get the staff meeting over, but the EOC was getting so many calls from Keystone through Rapid City and through above Rapid City and the canyons, and so there was a whole bunch of things happening. Well, one of the first guys that gets called out is one of the county commissioners from Meade County, was Bob Mellon. And Bob was a commander of one of the units, and he takes the group up Nemo Road, and there's Box Elder Creek there, and that was the first casualties we had from the National Guard that night. We lost 2 people on Box Elder Creek. We got everything organized, and the people from Roe Bay Lake came to Sturgis, and some of them went to Rapid City, and maybe some went to Keystone. I can't be sure of that. But we had Bob Meckling was manning the phones at the EOC, and he was fairly much like he would be here. He kind of took charge of everything, like he would here, and it was a good thing he was there, and so he did that. But these 2 guys know a lot more about what happened exactly in Sturgis that night, so I'll let them go with that. But I want to tell you a little bit about Fort Meade Dam, and that was, it was so fortunate that nobody in Sturgis died. It's almost unbelievable actually if you look back at it. But that Fort Meade Dam was built in 1909, and when the Corps of Engineers flew over that, they made the decision that dam had to go. And they hadn't even been on the ground there. They just made the decision. It was built in 1909. They had reconstructed it a couple times, and it was 54 feet high from the spring bed to the top of the dam. And so the Corps asked the National Guard to, if they could help them get rid of that dam, get the water out of it, and not get rid of the dam because it was posing a threat to Sturgis. And so, again, Chris Meckling comes back into the picture. This is after the 10th to the 12th. And so Chris Meckling and the Corps gets a hold of him and Bob Daney. And what 2 better guys to get a hold of if you got an emergency? And so they were fortunate there. And so Bob Daney gets a hold of Bob Graham's, and because there's no road into the dam anymore, and Bob Graham saves the day.
I gotta stand. Well, anyway, I have to go back just a little bit because when I came back from Vietnam and then went to another assignment at Fort Rucker, Alabama, when I finally got out of the Army, I came back and I didn't have a kind word to say about the Army, and most of them were 4-letter words. But anyway, my best friend in Sturgis all through high school was Herbie Doering. That was Duke's younger brother. And so I knew Duke, and I knew Duke's brother Chuck real well. And I grew up one street over from Lozelle Street, where I grew up, was where Herbie Doering lived. And so when I got back to Sturgis, when I finally got out of the regular army, it wasn't long, and Duke was the unit administrator up in Spearfish for the 842nd Engineer Company. And since I knew Duke, I'd stopped because I was a full-time student at Black Hills after I came back. And Duke coerced me into joining the Guard. And the guy probably saved my life. He really did. Because I went from a 3-year tour with the regular army and hating it to retiring 35 years later. And so Duke must have done something right. Plus I met my wife Linda while I was up at Black Hills too, and so that kept me on the straight and narrow pretty much. But now back to the flood. As Duke mentioned, some of the units were up at Robay Lake, and I was with the 842nd, and I was a heavy equipment operator in Vietnam. I operated bulldozers and graders and earth movers, and so that's what I was doing at Robay Lake. I don't remember if I did a whole lot of it at that time, but Friday night, years ago, the Army Guard, Friday night came at the end of your duty day. They released you for the weekend, kind of like a 2-day pass. And Cliff Lynn was the mess sergeant, wasn't he, Duke?
Yes.
Cliff Lynn, our former mayor of Sturgis, was the mess sergeant up at Robay, and Friday night was steak night. And I don't know if a lot of people knew that, but when I came back from Vietnam, I was full of bugs. You know, because I ate a lot of food off the economy. We didn't get meals all the time that were really prepared by cooks, not that they were worth a damn anyway. But and we didn't have MRAs like they do today, meals refused by everyone. We had sea rats and cans, and some of that stuff was canned back Korea time, so World War II. As long as the cans weren't swollen, you presumed they were good to open up and eat. But anyway, so Friday night was steak night, but everybody bailed, and it was raining like a Clydesdale peeing on a flat rock. I mean, it was just dumping water. And I had a motorcycle, and it was a Yamaha that I bought from J.C. Pappy Hoyle in Sturgis, and it had 2 mufflers on low. And so I had my steak, because I wasn't passing up a good steak. And then I had a raincoat, and I got on my Yamaha and started heading back through Deadwood. And of course I got to Deadwood, and 14A was closed, so I had to drive up over the hill and get over to Spearfish, I think they call it exit 17. And then I made my way back into Sturgis that way, and then I took exit 30 and got onto Lozelle Street. And I remember, the only thing I can remember, like Carla talked about the water on Lozelle Street, well, the whole time I was driving Lozelle, my motorcycle was underwater, and I had to keep the throttle wrapped all the way because I was afraid the engine was going to quit, and all I saw was bubbles coming up from the muffler. So thank God I made it to Mom and Dad's house on Lozelle Street, because for those of you that go back a long ways, the sawmill was where we were only a couple doors from Graham's and Sons Sawmill, where Massaberry Clinic is now, and the big white house that's still there, that's looking pretty run down now, that's where I was raised. Well, anyway, I made it in there, and it wasn't long after, it was either Duke or somebody called and said, "You're going back to work." And so I was one of those who got ended up in Rapid, but I didn't stay in Rapid long. And then the call came out that Dead Man Dam was going to break. And Bob Daney was an old family friend, and I guess, I can't remember for sure, but they found out I was a dozer operator, and so we loaded up a dozer and we hauled it up Dead Man Canyon. And then Bob, if everybody knew Bob back then, he was pretty easygoing. and he always smoked Tipperillo cigars. And I remember Bob, and I had gone through some tough times in Vietnam, but Bob didn't really tell me much about that damn dam. You know, he said the Corps of Engineers are worried it's going to break and it's going to flood Sturgis, and we got to build a road so they can get some float bridge equipment, which the rafts, and then we bring a crane up there, and then the crane would load the rafts onto the water, and then they'd have pumps that pump the water out, and then the Corps was going to blow the dams. Well, that really sounded pretty straightforward. Well, what the technical part they didn't talk to me about was there was no damn road. You know, when we finally got to the spot where the road ended, that's where it was just a steep hillside.
Bob, where was the dam?
Well, the dams, if you drive up past the DOT in Sturgis, and you follow that up there, and then where Cooper, DCI agent,
2.5 miles.
2.5 miles up, you just drove up Dead Man Canyon, and now it's got a gate on it, you can't drive up there, but there's cabins up there. Gramps has had a cabin up there, Sparks has had a cabin, Kelly's had a cabin up there, and then beyond that was the Game Fish and Parks had a feeding station there, and then the dam was up above that. And so I remember we unloaded the Caterpillar, which was a cable-operated TV-18. Not real fancy, and there was, you know, there are not a lot of communications, and so Bob just said, well, let's just start heading up the road until the road finally ended, and we could see the dam in the distance amongst the trees, and it was just a damn hill, just a damn steep hill. And I said, well, where's the road? Bob said, we're going to build a road. And, you know, nowadays equipment is so much more technical and so much better than it was then. And 6-way hydraulic blades and pilot touch, and this was just an old bulldozer. And I learned how to run a bulldozer in Vietnam, and also my dad had an old TV6 or something Caterpillar. He lost his little finger in that Caterpillar at the sawmill. One cold day, he was trying to start the pony engine on it, and the fan belt caught the edge of his glove and started to pull the glove in, and he pulled the glove back and it pulled his finger off. But not to worry, George Malin was Dad's hired man. He saved that finger and put it in a jar and took it to my mom a little later. Well, anyway, that's another story. But anyway, Bob sat on that diesel gas tank to the right of me, and I started digging into the hillside, building a road on that steep hill going up to the dam. And the whole time, excuse the expression, I was shitting bullets. You know, because scared to death. I mean, yeah, I had things in Vietnam that scared me too. Like one time I drove over a 500-pound bomb that the Viet Cong had booby-trapped, and it sent the bulldozer straight up in the air about 10 feet, blew out both my eardrums, but damn, I wasn't hurt. You know, when it does settle, I was still in one piece. But anyway, I survived Vietnam to end up thinking, am I going to roll this damn dozer down this steep hill? And Bob would sit there smoking a Tipperillo cigar. Once in a while he'd nudge me, like I was getting a little too far into the hill or getting a little too far off to the side. And we finally made it to the top of that hill and got to where we could get out to the dam, and then made the road wide enough, the little trail in it, and we finally quit raining on us, which was a godsend. And then they had rough terrain cranes that started hauling equipment up there, and my job was basically done there. But should I tell them about the Corps and blowing up the dam, or you want to talk about that, Colonel? Well, I didn't stick around for a long time after that because our water guys were there and manning the pumps 24/7 to start drawing water down from the dam. And finally, the Guard pulled their equipment out and the Corps was taking it over. and having worked with the Corps of Engineers for many years, if there's anybody that could pole vault over mouse turds, it was the Corps of Engineers. And they still do it today. Anyway, in Vietnam I learned, and the engineers, engineers have a motto, essay-ons. I always thought it was tell us where, we'll shove it there. But the P formula was plenty. Whatever you do, use plenty. So the Corps, if 100 pounds of C4 dynamite was good, 500 pounds was better. And so they did all the work and they drilled all the holes, and I think there was a big fanfare, and maybe there was news people there. But when they blew that dam up, it had about 3 or 4 or 5 feet of water and about 40 feet of silt. And so the flood of Sturgis lasted for about 11-12 seconds. And then it was over. With that, I'll turn it over to Colonel Wheeler.
I'm an East River guy. At the time of the flood, I was part of the 139th Transportation Battalion out of Brookings. And so everybody in our group were East River people. We didn't know anything about Sturgis. Most of us knew where it was, but we'd never been here. Don't know anything about streets or where people live, who people are up here, except I didn't know Chris Meckling, of course. But Bob mentioned that the middle weekend of guard camp was always let the soldiers off to go do whatever they wanted to do for the weekend. But it was also, we had officers call, and we'd invite the general to come down and have a beer with us and visit and a little food and whatever. It started raining there at Camp Rapid, and so my wife and I went across the street. My wife and I and my son Charlie went across the street to the Pizza Ranch, or Pizza Hut, to have supper. And I'm sitting there at the Pizza Hut, looking back on Camp Rapid, and I see trucks start to line up. And I thought, what the devil's going on? Everybody's gone. There shouldn't be any trucks going anywhere. So I said, let's hurry up. I need to get back over there and see what's happening. And I went back to Camp Rapid, found out that there was a call for help up here at Sturgis. And there was, most of the officers were gone, most of the truck drivers were gone, so most of the guys that were still there were, for the most part, tourist people who were clerks and typists and supply people and things like that. They didn't, they weren't professional truck drivers. Not that we were all professional in the first place. But I said to my wife, I think I need to go with them because they need to have somebody along that can make some decisions and keep them out of trouble and help look after them once this thing is over, however long that's going to take. So we made quick arrangements for my wife to go spend the evening with some friends down just east of Canyon Lake Dam. And I thought that was all good, and I went to Sturgis. Got up here, of course, raining like a, how do you describe it? And got up here, of course, we didn't know anything about Sturgis, didn't know where the streets were, didn't know where the creeks were, didn't know where the water was going to be the worst. So we reported to the police department, and they provided local people with us that knew the streets, knew where to go, and sent us to try and do whatever we could to help people who were in trouble. I don't really know what all went on that night, because I think we had 6 trucks up here with us. I was in a Jeep with had a 3/4 ton truck behind us that followed us around in case we needed help. Dave Super, fortunately, was the guy that was assigned to us because he knew where the places were in town, where we should go and could go and things like that. And thank God for Dave, because we wouldn't have known what we were doing without him. And the other trucks that we brought up here, the police department sent somebody, a local person with each of them, to go provide as guides. One of the things I remember, and I don't know where in town we were, someplace over here along the creek north of Lozelle, somewhere, on a little side street, and we were driving in that Jeep. It was the old Ford F1, M151 Jeep. And the water was high enough so our feet were, the footwells where your feet are supposed to be, were sitting in water. The water was riding up across my seat, was getting wet, so I had to get my billfold out and put it up in my breast pocket, so I didn't get my billfold wet. That was deep enough water for that little Jeep, I thought. And we're riding along, and here's a lady standing out on her porch. And water all right up in front of her house. I guess the water was as deep as this table right in front of her house. We hollered over to her, "Do you need some help?" "No," she said, "I'm all right. All I need is some beer and cigarettes." We didn't provide her with It got to be a long night, obviously. It was, I recall it, finally somewhere around 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, things were calming down, and the police department seemed to think things were under control. So then we had to try to find places for these guys to sleep. And that was a challenge because, again, we didn't know anybody, and we had refugees out of their homes and into the public buildings. And ended up, the drivers went to, they found places kind of on their own with the people that had been guiding them. And I said, I want you back here at the police department at 6 o'clock in the morning, because we were starting to hear rumors of what was going on down in Rapid. And I said, we need to get back down there and see what we can help, see if we can help down there. Well, 6 o'clock in the morning, it was so foggy you couldn't see from here to that bottle of water. I mean, you couldn't see anything in this town. Got to the police department, they said, "Well, you can't go home, the roads are all blocked." I said, "Well, can't we go east of town and around?" "No," they said, "the bridges are all out that way too." So then you gotta figure out how you're gonna feed these guys that I brought up with it. And I don't know, we had a dozen of them or so, and we went down to the local cafe and happened to run into Colonel Herbst, who was the 109th Engineer Group Commander at that time. And I said, "I don't have enough money to pay for meals for all these guys with me." He said, "Don't worry about it, just sign the ticket and get it to me." He said, "We'll get it figured out somehow." So the cafe downtown, I think it was Bob's Cafe at that time, fed the soldiers, and I signed the chit sheet and gave it to Colonel Herbst, and I presume it got taken care of. The sheriff never came back. Then we proceeded to try to figure out how we're going to get back to Rapid. Well, they wouldn't let us go down the interstate because the interstate was closed. And finally, about 10 o'clock in the morning, they said they think it's getting opened up so you can start. So we start in the fog, headed down back towards Rapid, got down to Box Elder Creek, and here's a big payloader on the bridge, scooping debris, tree branches, stuff off the bridge. Finally, they got a path cleared across the bridge and let us go across one truck at a time. And we got into Rapid, and there's a whole bunch more story about Rapid and how I got hooked up with my wife and that sort of thing. But that's probably enough time for me.
That's great. Have you guys got any comments on Richard's pictures, anything that, in regard to the dam, that you'd like to say?
Demo of the dam.
I think Civil Defense flew in the pumps for the dam. And then they measured the depth of the dam to see what needed to be done. And they had talked about 40 or 50 foot of water depth on it, and it ended up they went out in a boat and checked the level, and the level was only about 8 to 10 foot. So when you talk about over-exaggeration or overreacting, it ended up being that way, but the guy that had the pumps and was maintaining them, I think they had 4 pumps to them. But I don't remember, Duke, did they fly the pumps in, or did they drive them up there? I can't remember.
Haul them up with trailers.
After they bought me the road.
Bob took part of the cushion to the seat with him after that.
I thought somewhere I had read they flew the pumps here, but I could be wrong. I do have a description, Bob, I got the official description of the explosion. You wanna hear it?
Go ahead.
All right, here we go. So, the experts placed 3,000 pounds of explosives at select spots on the structure. The blast, accompanied by a 200-foot fireball, blew a wedge 20 feet wide at the dam's base and 80 feet wide at the crest. The rubble was cleared and one threat was eliminated. I knew that information would come up before.
That's where they got the P for plenty.
Yeah, right, yeah.
You have some more pictures you wanna go through, Richard?
You know what?
You have a question right back here, the young lady in a purple
Let me
coat.
have the microphone.
Yep.
Where's the question?
This lady right here.
I have a question. I was gonna say, I was at that dam.
Well, here, just a second, you tell us.
Well, we, right there?
Yeah.
Yep, right there.
We were, lived just up by the interstate, and, we called the city and, talked to, Joe, said, you know, if anybody needs anything that we can get into, with horseback, call us and, you know, we'll try and do that. And they said, no, they didn't have anything then, but they, you know, they call us if they needed anything. And we had, like 50 horses, and we had one corral that had barbed wire gate on it because it'd gotten broken. It was, and we had 3 mares that took turns taking that gate down. And, so we took and just had all 50 of those horses out in the front thing when the city called because we were gonna take them up in off the canyon and get them out of there because they didn't wanna be there. And I said, well, they know more than we do. So, we just got them all out and I went to run them up there in Boomerang and it was the city and they said, was it Larry? Maybe that was up in the dams?
Oh, I wouldn't remember.
It was somebody that lived in Fort Lee, was it like Larry Ramprey or something? Anyway, nobody thought of the dams until he thought of them and he went up there and looked at them. Because he said, yeah, dam could be kind of dangerous, and that's where the whole thing started out. Well, the city called us and they said, we've got something you need to do. And I said, well, we got 50 horses out in the front yard, what do you need? They said, his batteries are starting to run low, and he'll only talk to us every 15 minutes, or if the dam goes. And they were pretty nervous about that. And so we said, well, it'll just take us, you know, not very long to run the horses up. So we ran them a mile up Vanocker and put them in pasture up there, and we came back down with the horses, and I drove down here to the city and picked up the batteries they wanted us to take them up. I asked them, I said, well, I can go up on top and drop down to that dam, can I? And they said, no, you have to follow the road up. I said, well, it's flooded through there. Is there any road there? And they said, no, you have to go up that way. I said, well, can we get through? There's a fence there. They said, no, you'll be able to get through. The fence will be washed out. So we get up there where the gate is, and of course the gate's still closed and it's washed down, but it's about this wide on this side of the gate, except there's a couple of wires hanging there, but there was a big old railroad like post off to the side. We thought if we pushed down hard enough, it'd break the wires. Well, we pushed it and it did. And so we got around that and we started up, and you know what it was like going up that edge. There was either a rock slide over the road, or it was washed kind of in like this. And I'm like, you think this is safe? Yeah, this doesn't look good, you know? And we go up there, and I ride this little Welsh pony stallion. And he's going up there, and he's going out with his front feet, and he's slamming them on the ground. Bam! Bam! And he got out, stretched out as far as he could, that he'd move his front feet up. And I'm thinking, this isn't good. And, yeah, it was a long ways down. We knew we were gonna be dead if we went off of there. I was just like, that's gonna be it. And we kept going and we got up there, and of course, my husband at the time was riding a bigger horse, so it was like, if I got across with the little one, was it gonna fall in when he come across with the big one, which had no idea, trying to find out if it was safe or not. She just came. But we got all the way up there, and then we couldn't get across. We had to go up above the dam and try and get across, but we couldn't get across with horses because there was so much brush. So we tied the horses on that side, and we walked through above it. And we got through, got over there with the batteries, and I could see the National Guard coming down off the hillside, where we could have just come down off the hillside. And I'm like, they probably got batteries, So, anyway, we get over there, we took them the batteries, but, like I say, the National Guard was there then, so we were kind of like, was that, did we really do any good,
Thank you. What is your name?
And, then we rode back down through there and about drowned our dog on the way back.
So what was your name?
Dee.
Okay.
Faye.
Okay. Thanks. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
I'm Clint Jolly. My great-grandfather came to Sturgis in 1883. And my grandfather showed me a map. There were 9 creeks coming into Sturgis. And they all merged down towards the gap. But at about 3 o'clock that afternoon, the fire department got called up to Boulder Canyon because of flooding basements. So I went up there and we decided after a little while, this is senseless, we better get back to town. The bridge is all washed out. We went across that bridge and Clyde McHugh was about a half mile behind us and he didn't get across that bridge. So then we get into town and I was in the office right over there. And my wife calls, who lived a block over there. And she says, you gotta come and get us, it's starting to flood over here. And I'm looking out and I said, oh, come on, you're kidding me, looks like this. So my brother and I walked over there, we got to Howard Street, and the water's about this deep. I lived in the old Doling Creek, it moved over into the bed and my house was sure enough flooding. So we took her to my brother's house on Junction Avenue, which is high ground, which wasn't much better. But then as the night went on, we were doing ambulance calls with a 5-ton truck because our ambulances weren't going anywhere. And we had 2 of them that had to go to Fort Meade. And the only way to Fort Meade was around Old Stone Road and that way. So the night fire department spent doing ambulance calls out of a 5-ton truck. And that's how we got to the hospital here and to Fort Meade. So we wrapped up about, I suppose my brother and I went home about 1 or 2 in the morning. 5:30 the phone rings. And it's a dispatch and they want us to go to Blackhawk on Back Elder Creek and pick up a body off the bridge. And we said, no, that's Pennington County, call Pennington County for me. They're too busy, they told us to call you. So the next, 4 days, we had 5 or 6 embalmers working in our funeral home, and we would shove the bodies from Rapid to Sturgis, clean them up, tag them, and take them back. And we did that for 4 more days. My dad came up from Arizona and worked for a funeral home in Rapid City during that time. And it was a busy time, so.
Great, good story. Yes, we'll go back. Richard?
Yeah, let's, first of all, you wanted me to put this picture up there.
I don't know exactly what was happening there. They're taking that
I'm going to
pipe,
give you this here. There you go.
that pipe across there, but the guy in the back is a specialist, Terry Smith. And I don't, he was living here at the time. And I've got another photo with, on top of the dam with Chris Beckley. I don't know if you've got that one or not.
I had to go back and look.
Anyway,
at
it doesn't make much difference, but Chris, and that was, when you were standing on top of that dam, it looks like those guys were just having a walk in the park, but it was fairly dangerous up there to be walking on top of it.
The picture on the right, that shows what had happened to the dam before, that was kind of the damage that was done to the dam before the Corps blew it up after the guard had taken the water level down. So it kind of shows how it washed it out from the backside.
Okay, I wanted to read a little paragraph here that really gives a nice summary as to
What is up there now? Like, the dam no longer exists, like it's just open area now?
the dam no longer exists, right?
Oh, the dam's still there.
It is?
No, it's the last time I was up was years ago, but I don't believe it's changed. The Corps never came back.
Okay.
They just blew a big hole in it.
They just blew a hole, they just blew a wedge in it, right?
Yeah, they just blew a big wedge in it and left it. So it's still
Yeah, it
there.
would be, yeah.
Does it still hold some water, like?
Oh, it may hold a little, but,
Right.
not much,
How had they built it if there was no road?
Well, at the time,
There was. We went up it.
I think the WPA or the CC camps built all those dams back then. And so that was back dirty 30s time. And so they built a lot of dams all over the United States. And the Corps, of course, inherited all those dams later on. And many of those are still viable. But, with all my experience with the Corps, not allowed to the Corps did exactly what they do. They took care of the problem and never came back. And that's, if you go up there, if you can get up there, I don't think it changed. Gail?
Okay, Richard has a few things he wants to show, and then we're running over, but we'll have time to take all your questions in a minute.
All right, and then I want to make sure Jim gets his we got a little surprise that we want to present. This is a really quick summary of what happened in Sturgis. In Sturgis, floodwaters destroyed 5 homes, damaged 50, and pushed many mobile homes off their foundations while filling them with mud. On Bearview Creek, a motel was extensively damaged, and park facilities were demolished. Ridge approaches and portions of Highway 14A between Deadwood and Moeller Canyon washed out. All of North Sturgis was covered with water, while many streets were damaged. Their surfaces broken and covered with debris. No lives were lost in Sturgis, but the Red Cross gave over 800 typhoid shots, and patients, staff, and residents of the Sturgis Community Hospital and Community Nursing Home were moved to the Fort Meade Veterans Hospital and McKee Nursing Home. Some residents, this is what I thought, this is the second time I mentioned Rapid, and I thought this was important. Some Sturgis residents went to Rapid City as volunteers because the damage there was greater than in their own town. But that's a nice way to end that. These are some personal, this is out of the E.B. Wilson photos that I was telling you about. And they had quite a story to tell about.
Can you hear Richard in the back?
Can you hear me? Okay, that would work. So this is written by his daughter. These photos were taken by my father, E.B. Wilson. He and my mom, Frida, lived in Boulder Canyon immediately after the first bridge on the road from Sturgis, still in Meade County. They were taking care of 2 grandsons, Bert and Barton Renz, and had to climb the hill to get them somewhere back to their parents, Bill and Linda Renz. So these are pictures from that. I guess we go through it quick. They're kind of blurry, so.
Did you say these are Boulder Canyon?
Yes, these are all Boulder
So it's kind of hard to tell, but that's like half of the road is
Right,
what's
is
supposed to be.
Prospect. And I think that's similar to the one that I have. This might be from the other direction. There's some bridge rails. There's a bridge washed out. That's another bridge. And I'm not sure what that bridge is. It must be somewhere up in that area. And in these pictures I got from Joan Bachmeyer, her dad took these. This first one we actually used on the flyer.
Yep, I drove by there the other day and cannot figure out if that is the same house that's sitting
That house is
there.
there, I think there's trees.
It's different, it's a different color, but it's been added on to if it is.
Yeah. And there's Sherman Street. It's a house of that. Okay. That's on William Street. That's the city park. There's more at the city park. If anybody wants, I can email this slideshow, and even my notes if you want them. You know, this is all kind of quick. This is a bridge, this is just the reconstruction of a bridge. Now, Jim Holland, this is a little short presentation we're gonna
Jim?
have, and then we'll go back to
Questions?
because I know everybody's got stories, but I want to make sure we catch this, because this is a little bit. I'm gonna have you. I know you're gonna have to step over here in order to be on the camera.
I don't know if I want to follow any stories by the National Guard. What I'm going to be able to do here, but the one great controversy that came out of the flood was the idea that some cloud seeding had contributed to the level of the rainfall that night. And doing some research on that, we found out that actually one of the two flights that they did that afternoon was in the Sturgis vicinity. They dropped some what they call table salt or sodium iodide, I think, or something like that, to try to stimulate some rainfall. That was an ongoing experiment from the Bureau of Reclamation, Department of Interior, through the Institute of Atmospheric Sciences at the School of Mines. So that afternoon, they made a swing in the Black Hawk area. Well, just kind of, I guess I would call it west. There's it's kind of hard to tell here, but on this, you kind of see the little curly line there by Black Hawk. They're kind of in the center of that image. That was one of the flights that they made, dropped 100 pounds, a couple hundred pounds of material in the, they tried for the updraft to try to get the material taken up into the air mass, and the idea was that they would, these particles would attract water vapor, form a raindrop, form clouds, and then drop as precipitation. So after that, at about just after between 3 and about 3:20 that afternoon, they dropped near just to the west of Black Hawk. Then they made a swing up to the north and east of Bear Butte and dropped some material there. And then they went, I guess about 10-15 miles to the east of Black Hawk and drop some more. Well, the second flight that they were going to do, they were going to actually go up by Pactola in that area. Well, the weather was so bad at that point that the turbulence was so bad, they said the pilot was having trouble controlling the aircraft. So they went, instead they went south of Rapid along Highway 79 and dropped another batch there about 5:30. There's still some speculation as to whether that material actually had any effect on the heavy rainfall areas up in the Pactola watershed, and that first flight may have gotten up into the the watershed for Galena, for Bearview Creek, and for Dead Man Creek. Nobody really knows. There was, there wound up being a couple of lawsuits filed in '75 alleging that this had contributed to the disaster, specifically in Rapid. They never went to trial, or the testimony never really was made in a courtroom setting. Both lawsuits or both actions were eventually dismissed. And so that was, you know, we thought we should at least address that. That was a part of what was going on. Who knows if it had any effect on Sturgis. Most of that would have been to the east and the north of us, relatively far away from where the heavy rains hit. I remember seeing a chart that we found here that said that the Sturgis area received between 4, probably closer to 6 inches of rain that night. Up above in the Dead Man areas, Dead Man and the Bear Butte drainage maybe received closer to 8 to 10, and that's what we got the benefit or the detriment of here. So anyway, we just wanted to, if there's any controversy there, I'm sure we could probably go into a whole hour on this. So anyway.
So yeah, that's all I have. So yeah, please, if there's more stories.
Richard, I think the other day you told me that the first weather and flooding advisories actually came into Sturgis before Rapid City that day.
There was a Northern Hills thing that I had there.
Yeah, so the first flood advisories that day was actually for the Northern Hills, before the situation in Rapid City occurred. Okay, questions, we're ready. Anybody?
You gonna have more stories?
Yes.
That's good. One quick thing, she was just telling me that,
You want to use the microphone? Tell your name, please.
Well, my name's Cindy Gray, and I don't know the whole story about it, but you told some of it. Most of you know Joanne and Dean Harmon, but their daughter was born at the Fort Meade VA, and because she was one of the ones that was evacuated and was pregnant, and they named her Victoria Ann after VA. So that was kind of interesting.
Great, Cindy, thank you. Anybody else? Yes. Please identify yourself.
Okay, my name is Gail Urban, and on June 9th, it was exciting because we were at the First Presbyterian Church on Junction Avenue for my sister Nancy's wedding, and I was bridesmaids. And as I remember, it was a beautiful day when we went into town, but when the rehearsal part got over, I remember walking to the front of the church and stepping outside to get some fresh air. And I remember seeing water just gushing down Junction Avenue, and I thought, where did that come from? And about that time, there was a car, right, I guess there was a gas station across from the church, and there was a car stalled, and this young woman with a small child got out on the driver's side, and I could see there was a child, I think, on the other side, and when he got out, he started getting swept away in the water, and somebody from the gas station jumped out and grabbed him, and then they helped her too, and I just saw all that happening. It was just like, I couldn't believe it. And then the other thing that sticks in my mind was the next morning, the radio was filled with announcements of people looking for people and people that were lost and trying to find family members, and there was obviously somebody else out there that had the same name as my dad, so they were saying George Blair was missing, and we were getting calls all morning and saying, are you okay? We heard George is missing, and we were just, well, no, he's right here. Anyway, so that was my memories.
Hi, I'm Galen Remington. We had our wedding rehearsal that night, but we had just moved the trailer house up to Triangle K Trailer Court. And one of the pictures that Richard showed with the Highway 14A halfway washed out was right at the end of our trailer house. We were gone for a week on our honeymoon and didn't even know if we were going to have a house when we got back. And then we get home, and if that road had come bare through there, we wouldn't have.
Yes. Well, hearing your stories.
I'm Carla, and our parents lived on William Street, and you saw one photo right then of William Street. And Fairview Creek, the Oak Creek bed was William Street, and then the creek ran behind our house then also. And so we had water on both sides of us as the night went on. There was a house built behind us at that time. Their garage went with the creek. The house stayed, but they moved it as high up on the hill as they could get it later. I didn't realize that Joanne's daughter was born then. I had just got home from the hospital the night before with our oldest daughter, and didn't quite realize how I might have ended up having to be on Fort Meade if I'd have still been in there at that time. So, but I went home to my parents' house and was staying in the basement with the baby. My husband was out of town right then, and the whole basement, filled up. So we had Dad said about 15 minutes between the time that we found out this was going to go on and the time he had to turn off the electricity to get me and baby and everything we could up the stairs. So it was an interesting night.
Okay, got another one back here. What's your house was a rain?
I'm Sandy Jolly, and my husband really glossed over my hysteria. Because we had an old dirt basement over there, we're two houses from the old Methodist church. And the water was pouring in this basement, and I freaked out and thought, oh, gas explosion. Our oldest son turned 3 the next day. I was trying to decorate a cake. But I had a very fractious day with 2 little boys, a year and a half, and one going to be 3, trying to get ready for this birthday party that was supposed to happen. And I had rolled up hot dogs and crescent rolls and bagels, and I said to Clint, supper's ready for the I'll never be home, this is what I need. Finally got the kids settled down, I'm in my old Kennedy rocker, and I'm looking out my front door. I finally opened it up and let Chris go play on the lawn porch. Because he was tired of being in the house. And so I'm rocking John back and forth, and I thought, what is that kid doing out there? And the Great Dane was out there with him. And I thought, if I didn't know better, I'd swear he was playing in water. He was. The water was swirling around the steps and the porch. And that's how I discovered that we were being flooded. So then they hauled us up to Marty's house, up from the funeral home, left us, and the water came up there, and I watched the water go into his Grandpa Waldman's basement. And I couldn't do anything about it because I wasn't about to leave my children. And there were people in rowboats coming down Junction, yelling and screaming and having the best time. It was a big party. And the water was just, I wondered, am I going to be flooded? But that's the story of my night. And I didn't see him for days. Oh, one other thing. Food was rationed. You could get 1 loaf of bread and 1 gallon of milk. And Ellen and I had to feed all of those funeral directors. So we went to Harold Johnson, the manager of Piggly Wiggly, quietly told him what we needed because we had all these guys we needed to make sandwiches for, and they let us buy groceries, and people were looking at us, but we tried to be as discreet as possible.
Thank you, Sandy. Next, anybody else got questions, comments? Yes.
My name is Gary Erickson, and my husband taught, Gary Erickson.
Gary, okay.
And my husband taught school here for 40-some years, and so he was working for the police department on the 9th of June in the night. The kids and I tried to call my grandmother that lived up where the chamber is now, and of course the phones were all out. So we just went to bed, didn't know what was going on, and we actually didn't have much water in the 800 block of Sherman Street. But he was in the police car, he worked for the police department in the summer times. And he said as he was going down Lozelle Street, his car started to float. He's very unnerving. But he also was a ham radio operator, and the next day, we had people lined up in front of our house to come in to try to reach family in other parts of the country to let their families know that they were okay. And this went on for hours. But he was able to help a lot of people get acquainted with it, get news to their families that they were okay.
Good information. Were you gonna say something, Dee Dee, or just have, go ahead.
I just have a question. We're talking about the dams, and the one colored photograph that we saw was the Fort Lee Dam, right? And is that gone completely now? I'm the Fort Meade Dam, because that was an issue at the time too, right?
You didn't have anything to do with that one.
Yeah.
You didn't have anything to do with that one, but the Dead Man Creek Dam was the one that you guys did,
Well,
but
they
is
called
the
that-
Fort Man?
No, they called that a Fort Meade Dam.
Oh, okay, it was one and the same?
They might have called it that. We called it the Dead Man Dam.
Yeah,
Okay.
a lot of people call it Fort Meade Dam
Yeah.
because I guess at one time, they said they were gonna have it as a water supply for Fort Meade, but it's on two different, mineral on each side, so it leaked out. So it didn't ever held water.
Yeah, I think a lot of us thought the Fort Meade Dam was at Fort Meade.
No, no, that was the one they used to call that Fort Meade.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to clarify, because I was confused.
Anybody else? Questions?
Look in the back right there.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed.
In the official Corps of Engineers, they call it, yeah, they call it Fort Meade Dam. So
Okay.
Just thinking of your processing of the experience as a child, and this is just a lighthearted irony. Later that summer, the children who were going into kindergarten that year had to take their readiness test. And several of the questions on the readiness test had to be disqualified. One of them in particular was a pool of water, a puddle of water, and then the child had to choose what one would use to clean that up. And one was a mop, one was a shovel, and one was a bulldozer. They were all right answers that summer.
Okay, thank you so much for your patience for the long program today. Everybody's story was wonderful. Really appreciated your coming and turning out. I have a few gifts for some special people that were here today. These are presented on behalf of the Sturgis Area Arts Council. Yes. And Jim, where'd you go? Just a reminder, if anyone has an idea for a program they would like to see presented or present at History at High Noon, a story of your family. I know several of you here have already done family stories, but we are always interested in more, and so just contact any one of us. Anybody have anything else before we close?
When do you start in the fall?
Generally October. It'll be October unless we have so many programs we need to start in September. Okay, yes?
In hindsight, was there any real danger of the dam collapsing?
Probably not.
Probably not?
I don't think so. No. A lot of it had washed out prior to the Corps blowing it up, but I think they were just worried that the dam would completely fail. But
So it could have been backfilled and still
yeah,
had a lake.
yeah.
Some people said that there's a whole nother story in regard to the channel being built, and maybe that will be another program at another date about putting in the channel that replaces Dead Man Creek. So, thanks everyone.